KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan, 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42 Moriarty. Dagan, thank you for joining me today. How are you, my friend?
Those are good numbers.
Those are interesting numbers, aren't they?
They ring a bell, actually.
How's life?
Everything's good. I want to tell you this crazy story going on in the neighborhood.
Please.
This should entertain you. So, okay, where do I start with this? Little neighborhood drama, but in a funny way, I think in a hilarious way. And actually kind of an awakening for me, an epiphany a little bit at the end of this tale. So get this new family moving into the neighborhood. They moved on to the cul-de-sac, just a couple of houses down from us. They probably bought the house, I was thinking, maybe even back in winter, certainly early spring, and then took a while moving in. We knew that the previous family moved down to Florida or something, and somebody else was coming in. And just through word of mouth, various neighbors talking, supposedly a family from Brooklyn who moved to Philly, somewhere in the city limits or whatever, and then eventually bought the house out here in the suburbs, in the Philly burbs. But they were supposedly a Russian family, originally from Russia. Turns out, I think, from what I know, now I still haven't met these people or had any interaction with them firsthand, but they're from Georgia, not the state. Mm-hmm. And then by way of Brooklyn, moved to Philly and then ended up out here in Bucks County. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
All right. So I don't know too much about them, but husband and wife, apparently, 2 younger kids. I don't know the ages, maybe 8 and 10. They have little miniature dirt bikes, motorcycles, and they ride them around on the cul-de-sac, zipping around at 30 miles an hour with no helmet. So that was our first sort of introduction to these kids. A very 1970s model.
It's introduction to Eastern Europe. Go on.
Okay. I accept that.
Yeah.
I accept that. Yeah, a little bit crazy, a little bit tough, whatever.
Dude, I watched so many videos out of Russia and the Eastern European countries. It sounds right like I'm right at home. Go on.
That is an interesting note because you kind of get that flavor a little bit. So, but again, that's our only real interaction or kind of visibility with these people, because Helene's just kind of looking out the dining room window and being like, these kids should wear helmets, that type of thing, day in and day out. Well, it turns out one day, oh, you know how this started? I remember how this started. Lilia's best friend, Julia, her parents are very into New Yorkers, also, by the way, transplanted New Yorkers, by the way, very into just neighborhood. I don't want to say they're gossipy because I really like these people, but they're very plugged in.
Yeah, they're townies.
They're townies. Yeah. Perfect description. They're very plugged into the neighborhood happenings, right? So they always keep everybody informed, but sometimes you got to kind of take that with a grain of salt because rumor mill, so on and so forth. So turns out Julia comes over one day to the house and she says to us, well, this guy is getting ready to put these huge ornamental palm trees on the front lawn. This is what, vis-a-vis Julia's dad, they somehow he found that out. So I'm like, that's strange. A strange thing. Well, we'll see what happens. Turns out this guy puts in these 2 enormous, I'm not even going to exaggerate to you, 16 foot, they're higher than the roof, or almost as high as the second story. So talk about, typical 3,000 square foot brick colonial, very pretty house. Mm-hmm. And this guy erected these 2 enormous palm trees on the front lawn, flanking the front door. Okay. So
how does it look?
And let me tell you, add insult to injury, because now you're wrapping your mind around the gaudy aspect of this, right?
Yes.
They fully light up at night from top to bottom, full LED wrapping around the trunks of these palm trees, which I would say are honestly 22 inches in diameter. These are not small. And then the top, the palm fronds or whatever, lights up green. Okay. It looks like, honestly, something you would see in the lobby of a Las Vegas casino. Gaudy, very decorative. They would look at a place, though, like now we're talking about Bucks County. It's kind of farm country. It's, it's got a certain aesthetic, colonials, traditional, whatever you want to call it, right? a Northeast vibe, a Northeast flavor. But these things would look out of place in Bel Air. Like, it's just weird. I don't even want to describe it as ostentatious. Everybody has different taste. But I guess it really comes down to a taste thing. But here's the funny part. This guy puts these up. Okay, I don't even know. Helene thinks they're bolted into the ground as if you got a really nice basketball setup, like a really nice, expensive basketball hoop, and they literally bolt into the concrete like that. Okay, because these things are huge. They're not inflatable or anything like that. Right. But here's what it's doing. It's drawing people down to look at the house in the car. like one of those houses that are decorated really badass for Christmas, but this is happening in August.
Totally.
And I could see my neighbors, on adjoining courts and streets that have no business coming down here, because my cul-de-sac, you got to kind of work to get to this part of the neighborhood, right? You don't just come down here for no reason. And they're driving around the circle. Now, my neighbors with cars that I could identify are coming around in the morning. They're trying to be discreet about it. They're coming really early in the morning before work, you could tell, or at night as the sun's going down. So they could check these things out firsthand, because Facebook, neighborhood chat rooms, and all this kind of shit, right?
Yeah. What's that app called everyone's on? Nextdoor? I don't use it.
Yeah, Nextdoor, whatever, Jamison for us, whatever it is. So here's what I'm thinking, though, right? I'm channeling this back to where we grew up, South Bellport, everything kind of south of Montauk Highway, between Montauk Highway and the Bellport Ferry, the Fire Island Ferry, right? Certain aesthetic. You could have a white house with black or green shutters. You weren't coming in there and doing anything too bold. You weren't going to paint your house pink.
You had to have your cedar and all these things.
Cedar shakes, right. That was acceptable. A few things. And then where we were in Brookhaven Hamlet, just a couple of miles away, same thing. And then it was an aesthetic consideration, but also the wildlife refuge. There was a wildlife sort of consideration there with preservation, and you couldn't have streetlights and you couldn't have sidewalks, the whole thing. Okay. And then you kind of realize how that's a little bit snobby, right? It's a little bit, well, it is what it is. So people want to be surrounded by a certain aesthetic. There's taste. I get it, right? But then I'm realizing maybe this guy's the only guy with creativity in the entire neighborhood, or kind of parse that with also the level of courage it takes to be able to do something like that. And I see any human being could see what this neighborhood looks like and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and paint colors and what's considered stylish and acceptable and all of these things. But I'm going to go outside of those boundaries and just put up these ostentatious, gaudy, right, palm trees and fuck what everybody thinks. Who cares, right? And I have to say, it's a little obnoxious. I also could kind of laugh from afar because he's a couple of houses away. He's not my next door neighbor. So there's that. Temper it with that. But also, I don't know, I'm just kind of acknowledging the fact that, take a walk on the wild side. Go off the beaten path. Do what you want to do. And I think it's really funny. And it reminds me that we don't see that a lot. Like, people don't go outside of those social norms very much, especially when it comes to appearance. The way you dress, the car you drive, the way you decorate that car, your house, your landscaping, all of that thing. So I don't know. It kind of taught me a little bit. And Helene's kind of a like mind when I brought up the point. It's like, I don't know. Do you? You know what I mean? What are you going to do? If it's plus, hey, it's providing entertainment for the neighborhood right now.
Yeah.
People are not used to this.
So presumably you don't have an HOA in your neighborhood. You don't have
nothing like that.
So I have an HOA in my neighborhood. I'm not an advocate of HOAs, but this is actually like one of the reasons why HOAs exist, is that so no one can get away with doing something like this.
Great point.
But at the same time, it's, first of all, you are getting the Eastern European experience. I just don't think you understand like that. Also, there are a few things you need to, I'm very familiar with Eastern Europe because I watch a lot of the random YouTube shit from there. Yeah. But you have to watch the YouTuber Bald and Bankrupt.
Bald and Bankrupt.
Yeah. He's a British dude who speaks fluent Russian and just goes to all these random places. But he literally is like, I'm in Estonia. I'm going on this random bus with a one-way bus ticket to this town I've never heard of. It's like 400 people in it, and we're just going to see what happens. And then he just Dude, it's fucking and he's clearly like ex-military, but he's very coy about it because he's just like very lingual, very savvy, but he literally just does crazy shit. Not even crazy shit. He just goes places you would never go and speak to people you would never speak to. And so I feel like I have this special connection through him to the most obscure Eastern European shit going on over there. And this sounds like that.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, so
let me ask you a question.
Yeah, please.
One quick question about this. Your take, your honest take. Now, if he doesn't, there's two ways you could look at this. This guy doesn't have the wherewithal to realize that this thing that he's doing on his front lawn does not fit within the framework of the aesthetic
of the Franklin, Pennsylvania colonial aesthetic.
Colonial,
the palm tree does not fit in with that. No,
right. Or he just literally identifies it and doesn't give a shit.
Yeah,
which
I think it's
either way, salute.
I think it's a little bit of both. He's not American, so he has no sensibilities for that.
Right.
He has to be taught that. And like just like
That's
we wouldn't, just like the things the mores in Georgia, like we would have no idea. If I went to Georgia, I wouldn't know what the specific mores and expectations.
Sure, that's a great point. And we're like really acclimated to the Northeast.
Right, exactly. That's what I was going to say. In a place like this, I mean, plus you said they came through New York City, much more liberal. And I'm not saying liberal politically. I'm just saying like do whatever you want. So here's the thing: is that you're between a rock and a hard place because you don't have an HOA and you cannot be the guy that complains about it. So
no, apparently some neighbor did complain about it. Yeah. And he said to her, now this is all second, third hand. I have no idea if this is really the way it is. He said to her that it was in his culture, if this was a thing for good luck. But here's the thing. So this is a good luck thing. Okay, fine. Either way, like God bless. But for me, I'm wondering, does this guy kowtow to the social pressure once he gets enough complaints or once he sees enough neighbors gawking, pointing, making fun, getting angry, whatever it is, which is not really right. That's what I really realized. Like, that's really not right. And I'm kind of feeling a little defensive for him right now. Does he bow to the social pressures and take these things down? I'm curious to see the way it plays out, but there's a big part of me that would feel really sad if he did, because he's trying to do his own thing. And honestly, it's not really hurting anybody, right? I mean, it really isn't. I could think of 10 more egregious things in this neighborhood that would aggravate me more than these palm trees. But I'm wondering, it's going to teach me a lot about this guy, this family, but specifically this guy, because if he really doesn't have the wherewithal, then how much of that social pressure and learning and education the hard way, right? The school of hard knocks will teach him and then he'll react accordingly. Or does he really have that fuck you attitude, which I'm kind of rooting for that. I'm rooting for B.
Yeah, I don't know.
We'll see how this goes.
What is America, right? Like, is it when in Rome? Kind of, I guess, but not really. I mean, that's why I get so upset. Not upset. I really don't give a shit. But I mean, it annoys me about when people complain about cultural appropriation. I'm like, cultural appropriation is awesome. Everyone should be appropriating everyone's culture as much as humanly possible. Like, that is what America is. If you don't cultural appropriation, you are out of your mind. You know, and by the way, you better start checking about 95% of the things you do, since your culture inevitably didn't come up with any of it. You know, just like ours. Like, it's just so silly. So when you see things like that, it's like, well, it's good luck in my culture, and it's like, okay, well, it's fine. Because do we want it to be? You know, Mom always laments. Here's a good example. Mom always laments that Grandpa never taught them Italian, right?
Yeah,
that they never learned Italian. They learned words and phrases and this and that, but they never learned Italian. In that generation, a lot of them didn't learn Italian, like the Sopranos generation, for instance, because it was looked down upon to teach kids Italian because they wanted to immerse them into America. So they were like, you don't need to worry about Italian. Don't speak it. Don't even acknowledge it. Right?
Assimilate.
Right. And that's the wrong answer. That was stupid. And that was only 1 or 2 generations that did that. But that makes Italian America, I think, and German America and a few others that came in the early to mid 20th century really on the back foot compared to people that came before. So like you think about the people in your area of the woods, the Dutch and the German kind of the old style.
Sure.
They live there to this day. Some of
Yeah.
the Norwegians in Minnesota and Wisconsin and all that. And then later on, a lot of Hispanic, well, actually Asian after the Civil War, then Hispanic and all the rest, they kept their language. And so before and after, obviously, with Spanish and all the immigration going on from Africa and all the rest, it's good that they're speaking their languages. Not in public. I do think you need to speak English. Oh, I don't care if you're speaking in public, but, in discourse and all that. But It's good to keep that stuff alive. So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying, well, if that's like his connection to Georgia, it's like, okay, whatever. I mean, but I totally don't live next to that kind of person. So It's easy for me to say that as well.
Yeah, most of us will never experience anything like this because people don't go outside of those social norms, especially with things like their house, because that's the way you're perceived. And, I'm certainly guilty of that too. It's like, what if I really wanted to get creative and do me? It could get pretty crazy, especially someone who's creative or imaginative, artistic. So, yeah, I'm kind of rooting for this guy. But like you said, I don't want to talk on both sides of my mouth, though, because, you know what I mean? It's going to be interesting. I think a lot of this for me is going to see how this guy's personality is. Like, is he a friendly dude who just
That's
really
what I was going to say.
Has conviction and, really wants to have fun, and maybe it's his first time in a house that's not, in a city, and he has room and he has property and he can finally do these things decorate his house outside, put quite simply, right? To have a little space to do things. And so, if he's a dick, I'm probably not going to root for him as much, but that's life, right? That's where we always root for the good guys.
Yeah.
So I'll keep you guys posted.
I was going to say the similar thing, which is that this whole story hinges on him, the guy. If he's cool, then that's going to really be different than if he's a dickhead. And that's it. So we have to kind of just see how this plays out.
We got to see how it goes. Well,
yeah, good.
Colorful. It's been a colorful summer with that. It's been quite entertaining to see the cars pull up and down the street. I'm like, what are these people? Come on, give the guy a break. At least be a little more discreet. You're coming around the cul-de-sac like it's Christmas time, checking out a house with the Christmas lights. It's like, but they're entertained. This guy's providing some free entertainment. Give him that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
What's up with you, my friend? What's cooking?
Nothing really. It's Dana's birthday our sister's birthday when we're recording this. So everyone's coming over here to my house tonight.
Oh, nice.
And just
pool
for a few
party
hours.
action.
Yeah, just a little party, a little dinner, whatever. And
nice. That's
good. But I just wanted to say two things that were on my mind recently is that I've started taking protein powder the last few weeks when I work out.
Shit.
And it's just weird because I feel like I'm becoming like a gym bro a little bit. Not really though, but I work out every day and I'm starting to lift more and do all that kind of stuff. And I'm literally lifting so hard sometimes where I'm like,
Are you bench pressing?
No. I have free weights and I do like a series of different things with them. No, I don't have a bench or anything like that. Well, I have a bench actually, but I don't have the weights for that.
Okay.
So I've been doing that, but then I also do cardio every day.
You're juicing.
I'm juicing. That's right. I'm juicing. Like Mark McGuire.
That's right.
So, or Sammy Sosa. So I am, so I thought that was interesting. I'm interested to see how that all plays out, but I also have been more cognizant lately that I've just been sweating a lot more recently. And I don't know why that is. Like, it's really hot in the South, obviously. I'm not used to it really. LA is pretty hot too, but
that's true.
Different. And I also lived on the water, so it wasn't that bad there.
It wasn't bad where you were, no.
In Santa Monica, but I think it's because like I was telling Micah, she doesn't know me from way back in then I was like, I've had friends like ex-girlfriends and others be like, you do not sweat. Like, I don't know what it is about, like when I've been in Massachusetts or San Francisco, like it's so strange. You don't seem to work up like a sweat or get, and then so I was like, what changed? It must have been the environment. Also, I'm working out all the time, but I also think it's like my medication that I'm taking is making me sweat too. And it's not like I'm just sweating just sitting around, but I can't, like I get in the shower and then I get out and then I go outside to do something and I'm like sweating immediately. I'm like, what the fuck? I was walking the dogs after this the other day after getting out of the shower and sweating, and my neighbor's talking to me and he probably thinks I'm like insane because I'm like just sweating.
Your clothes are getting darker and darker.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm just standing there like in a t-shirt and shorts. So anyway, yeah, so I'm trying to like, watch out for the health, work on my upper body strength. And I've just never really tried. Like I started lifting weights last year, but I'm like really amping it up now because I don't want to get buff. I just want to I want to have just some muscles.
I'm looking at you. I could see some difference. There's a little bit, I don't want to say definition, but I guess it is definition, but the mass, there's something happening there with the upper body, the upper arms, chest, shoulders. Yeah, dude, there's something going on there. I mean, people that watch your content regularly could probably see that easily.
Let's see. I tried to make a muscle. I did the whole bodybuilding thing the other day for Micah, and I hurt myself doing it. I was like, oh. But it's not. I mean, it's not crazy yet, but it's getting.
It's not coming out the bottom like mine, like Popeye, like before he eats his spinach.
No, but I saw Dad last weekend, and he said you're looking great.
Yeah, you look good. I think this is the best you've looked. It looks like, it looks like you're getting buff a little bit.
I'm gonna fucking kick you through a wall next time I see you.
You could have done that 3 years ago.
Let's get into the topic. I am very eager to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
The topic at hand is Lost.
Oh.
The TV series, the famous ABC TV series that ran from 2004 to 2010. This was our topic. I mean, I put this one in the hopper. I had been thinking about it for a while. And before I say anything about it, because there's a lot to say about Lost, especially season one. But I want to know. I tried to kind of ask you, and you wouldn't tell me earlier on. So I want to make clear, and I was waiting for the show to say this. I texted Dagan a few episodes in, and I was like, "What do you think?" And he was like, "Well, how dare you? We wait for the show." I was kind of curious because I'm like, I don't want Dagan to watch 25 episodes of this thing and he's hating it, right? So I was kind of curious about that. But in watching it myself for the first time in a long time since it ended, I have a lot of disparate thoughts about it, and I'm really eager to hear what you think. So what was your experience like with season 1 of Lost? Talk to me about it.
Well, I'd never watched it. And I was eager to go into this. Now, you were concerned for me because you don't want to do anything that we're not going to both enjoy and everything like that. But I'm kind of looking forward into so many of the things we cover, be it a book, a movie, a video game, a TV series, whatever. We have seen already in the past, at least at one point or another. A lot of the times we're super fans of those things. So it's nice to go into something with a fresh set of eyes, something I have no experience with, and just give it an honest to goodness once over and just say, do I like it? Do I not like it? Am I on the somewhere in between in the margins? And I have to say, the first thing about this that dawned on me that I think is really refreshing, especially in this age of pop culture and social media and YouTube and subscription services, is that I realized going into this episode 1 of season 1 that this is completely unspoiled for me. I don't know anything. I didn't know anything about this show except that J.J. Abrams was involved in it and that there was some eccentric bald guy on a beach that I've seen images of. That's all I knew. I don't think I even knew that it was a plane crash. I knew they were marooned on an island. It could have been a shipwreck for all I knew. I had no idea. So that was really something nice to go into something so legendary, completely unspoiled. And I still am. Beyond those first 25 episodes, I'm completely unspoiled. So I'm really going into something as a newbie, which is really fun. And I have so many thoughts, man. I mean, the show really had me, I don't know, on the fence, I will say, for the first probably 15 or 16 episodes of the season. I really didn't know what to make of it. And a lot of that was probably because you have expectations of something so beloved going in, something so famous, something so important, right? So a lot of that was probably tempering expectations. But I'll start it right there, that it was really nice to go into something completely unspoiled and just go for an adventure, go for a ride, and be surprised by everything, by the tone, by the cast, by the setting, by the acting. I had no idea. I really thought this was going to be more like a reality show. People marooned on an island. I'm channeling maybe, I don't know, Lord of the Flies or Castaway. Certainly.
Those are the inspirations for the show. Survivor too.
Yeah.
Was an inspiration for the show. And
Survivor
that's the ultimate
too.
reality. Yeah, that's the ultimate reality.
So
show.
I wasn't expecting the supernatural, the mystical, the horrific, the monsters and all that kind of thing. I had no clue. So it was really nice to go into something where it was like, all right, I'm going for a ride I'm completely green. And also, the other thing I should note, I didn't go like I usually do. I usually go on deep dives with research, whether it's the cast, directors, inspiration, storyline, whatever. I didn't do any of that. There was no YouTube videos. There was really no reading up. It was just everything I could learn by watching the actual 25 episodes and really just immersing myself. And, that's it.
So you say you didn't. Well, first of all, that's good, and it's good because you'll spoil the rest of the show. It's important that you don't do that. I should note, I never watched the last season at all. I got so mad at the show towards the end that I stopped watching it. And I remember I was with my ex-girlfriend Cheryl at the time, and she was into it, so she watched it, but I didn't even pay attention to it. So I only really read about it at the end.
So you got through season 5,
right? And okay. I don't remember very much. Like in watching this, it was kind of like watching it new. I'll get into my whole experience with Lost because I think it's really relevant to the foundation of like why some people like it more than other people. But you said you were lukewarm on it for like 2/3 of the run, but you enjoyed you enjoyed the tail end of it.
Yeah, I felt like, and again, this was probably tempering expectations. I felt like it was going to be a different tone. I felt like the first, and it might still be kind of washing over me, and I might still be digesting it, but I felt like it was very soapy. And it was soapier than I expected. You have a lot of beautiful people. I feel like this is an extremely tragic situation. And almost from the get-go, like they weren't playing it up with that kind of dire emotion that you would expect to see. I wasn't expecting, again, the supernatural elements, whether it's aliens or supernatural or horror or monsters or dinosaurs, whatever's going on here. Still a lot of questions. Wasn't expecting the flashback. So there was a lot of things that I think I had to acclimate with. And then I think for me, I started to really respond to it in a positive way once the drama got kicked up a little bit and it felt a little more, I guess by that point, you're already getting invested in the characters too, which is not a coincidence probably. But I felt like once things got a little more serious, for lack of a better word, and that was probably around episode 16, 17, maybe with Sun and Jin's relationship currently on the island and the stress and the tension with that. And then Charlie and Claire and then everything happening, later on in that series with Boone and everything. I think that's when I really started to get drawn in and say, okay, I respond to this. I think there might be something too that's going to be a little hard for you, Kyle, and people that are well acquainted with the series that have watched this already, where I have a sneaking suspicion that this show is going to be awesome in retrospect once certain things get revealed and we find out what's really going on here. And I know we're dealing with J.J. Abrams, and I know we're dealing with the mystery box, and there's probably going to be a new question or two for everyone answered. But I'm thinking once certain things are achieved, once certain milestones are hit, I think it's going to be one of those formulas where it feels like, all right, everything's kind of settling into place, and now I see the brilliance in this. And I think that's still in the offing for me. I have a suspicion. I may be wrong about that, but that's what I think, because most things, modern things that we've watched together, right? Breaking Bad, Sopranos, Mad Men. We haven't done The Wire yet, but that certainly fits the bill. True Detective season 1. I fell in love with those things almost instantly. And this has been a little bit more of a courtship so far. But I could say by the end of season, by the end of this 25th episode, I'm in and my curiosity is piqued.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because I was worried about it. The reason I was worried about it is I'll go into just this question here that gets into it. Is Mike D wrote in and said, Mike D, I recently started rewatching this. Despite enjoying it years ago, I was struck by how annoying all the characters are, the dragged out scenarios and the constant flashbacks. It feels like the quality of TV shows has improved so much that this has aged very poorly. Is this something you have found going back into it? I don't know that it's aged very poorly, and I certainly don't agree that all the characters are annoying. I think actually a lot of the characters are awesome. I'm really interested I love the ensemble of characters. They don't maybe execute always well on them, but having this different cast of characters and backgrounds and intents and all that, I think is super cool. But I do think that the quality doesn't hold up. There's I don't know when it happened. I don't know what the show is that did it, and it was around the writer's strike, which happened towards the end of Lost.
Okay.
TV got better, way better. And while there's examples of TV before Lost and during Lost that are in some ways way, way, way better. Like, and The Sopranos, for instance, ended during Lost's run. So, I mean, there is like overlap there as an example.
Great point.
There is a higher bar these days for exceptional, what was appointment, but now is streaming, binge watching television. And no, Lost, it's surprising to me because when I was going back to it, I in my mind, I was always remembered, I was like, Lost season 1 and 2 are awesome, especially season 2 in my mind. That was how I remembered it being, like, these are awesome. And then the show gets more controversial from there. But in going back, what I realized was what I think made the show not seem as good as I remembered is it's just too long. There's just too much. And we'll talk a little bit about that because 24, and this, it's really 25, but it's 24 because there's an hour finale, I think, or a 90-minute finale, whatever it was. But that's a long season of TV that you do not really see anymore, and it's not really necessary. That people assume that shows were that long because of the demand of the show's storytelling, whether it was serialized or whether it was a more procedural show. But that's not really true. It was to fill in seasons and expectations for what at the time were network and later, expanded cable kind of offerings where there were commercial buys and ad buys, and you had to fill things in, and you had to have these weeks, 12 weeks before Christmas, 12 weeks after Christmas. And
right.
So you had to figure out how to make that work. There wasn't no other way of really doing it at that time. There were miniseries but this was kind of how it was done. But by the time Lost ends, we're on the cusp of a show like House of Cards that I think totally changed the game as far as presentation, execution, availability, and all the rest. And so Lost feels a lot like a relic. If you could go back and re-edit Lost, you could probably you would have to rework everything, but you can get rid of probably at least a third of the time from this season, and you don't need it at all. And you could leave all the mysteries exactly where they are, all the character development exactly where it is, but you didn't need to waste so much time on so many things. So that's kind of what I noticed going into it. However, one of the things I wanted to say, and one of the things that I think is vital to liking the show or not, and I hate to be this guy, is were you there or not when it was happening? And Andres wrote in and said, nothing will ever match the experience of speculating as a community on online message boards, hyper-analyzing every scene and clue on a weekly basis to try to figure out what's going on in the show. I do believe that this show is one of those rare things where you had to be there to fully understand it because it was a cultural phenomenon. And, it had 15, 20 million viewers at its peak every week. And I was in college when it came out. So I was right in the pocket of this. But what's funny is that I didn't know anything about Lost until near the end of the second season when my friend Brandon, who was one of my roommates when I was a freshman, but we used to hang out, he was like, you got to watch this show Lost. And I remember, Dagan, to your point, because I used to watch TV all the time. Everyone used to watch TV. So I would see commercials for Lost on a constant basis when you were watching ABC.
Right.
And I was like, what the fuck is this shit? Like, it just kind of went in one ear and out the other. It's like, it's the guy from Lord of the Rings and the guy from Party of Five, and they're on a beach, and it looks like really soapy and dramatic, and it's just like love stories or something, because they did a really bad job, in my opinion, of advertising what it really was, which was a sci-fi show. And right from the Lost intro in the beginning, when the things turns, that's fucking Twilight Zone. I mean, it's totally obvious what what it's an ode to. And it's funny because I read that and I remember saying that before I ever knew that. I'm like, this is so obviously an ode to Twilight Zone, just the way the intro. So they never set it up properly to capture someone like me during the time. But beginning with season 3, I was watching it. And that was when the show was really most popular. That was when it was starting to capture people through DVD and all of the rest, DVD by mail and going out and buying them. And it was really interesting because it's pre-social media, but we're well into the internet era. So people were on message boards. And I remember at IGN, it was crazy popular Lost, like speculating over Lost and doing all that. Got lots of time on IGN. And so I do think it's one of those things that you had to be there for because it was pretty unique in that way, in the way people absorbed it, the way it became a cultural phenomenon. And the people I knew in college that were watching it are not people that you would think would be into it. My girlfriend in college was really into it. She was just a sorority girl. She loved it. Right. my friends that were like pharmacy majors and engineers and all these random people. Like I remember gathering at people's apartments to watch it. And I remember that with Sopranos as well, which also ended when I was in college. And so I think that zeitgeist is really part of it, and it can't be recaptured. And it's a product from another era, really, even though it's not that old. It's a totally different, it's a network TV product. It's just not, we don't make shows like that anymore. And so,
very true.
So I think that's probably why you feel, because I agree, it's way soapier than I remember. It's way, it feels longer than I remember, and I don't feel like they were very judicious or economical with getting the story out in this season. But a lot of people really, really dig this season now. I'm wondering what you make of the overall story. Oceanic Flight 815, flying from Sydney to LA, crashes on an island that seems to be unfindable, or something's going on. Dave, what is going on, Dave? I mean, since you have no insight into anything yet, what do you even think is happening?
Yeah, it's really, I mean, first of all, I could already see one season in that whole zeitgeist, water cooler nature of this thing, where I do kind of regret not being there for that. You know, those communal investigations, discussions, week after week, that weekly serial cliffhanger model of this, where everybody's trying to figure it out, especially as things get ramped up and you realize this is not just a plane crash story. There's something more going on here. So I could definitely see that. And it's also a very clever model if you think about it. You have the mystery elements, sci-fi is introduced, maybe horror, we don't know yet, romance. So there's a little something for everybody. So if you look at it from purely from a marketing standpoint or a money-making standpoint, it's a very clever thing, because it's all welcoming, right? It's like everybody's, there's a little tidbit for something for everybody. So everybody come in, everybody enjoy. And yeah, I mean, I was kind of thrown, because I don't know what I was expecting, but I guess at the center of the thing, I was just expecting that this is a survival story. Think Lord of the Flies. And I guess I'm thinking about all the things that we grew up with that's applicable to this model, right? Whatever the tone, Gilligan's Island, Lord of the Flies, Swiss Family Robinson. Is there something Jurassic Park or Cloverfield-y going on here? Whatever it is, Land of the Lost, whatever, who knows? And you're trying to figure it out as you go along. But there's you realize there's two things going on here that are sort of enveloping you or getting you to come along for the ride or getting you invested, is this community of people who are, disparate strangers that have to form a family in order to survive in this foreign place, this island in the middle of the South Pacific. And they were 1,000 miles off course. So the likelihood of them getting rescued seems minimal, right? And then you have something else going on here too, where each one of these people are bringing their own unique baggage, issue, drama, problem, backstory into this thing too. So each one of them you're rooting for on a personal basis too. So you have kind of this dual pronged thing going on where you're just really invested in these people. And now it's getting ratcheted up because they're dealing with some unforeseen force, some science fiction, horror, supernatural, mystical elements that we're trying to figure out, that we're trying to play detective as it goes along too. So it's very clever. And I think I would have been really happy to see that, but I guess we're still in the offing of trying to figure out a lot of things by the time this season ends. Although certainly conjecturing and guessing comes in even this early on, right? But I mean, that's really it. Is that, and you know what really moved me by the end of this, Kyle? I don't even know what made me think of this or go off in this direction emotionally, but I think of just life, right? We're kind of thrust together with strangers on a daily basis, right? We're in the supermarket together, on the highway together, in an airplane, on a train, in a restaurant, whatever. And 99.9999% of the time, we do our time in that place with said strangers and then go off in our own direction and never really have any interaction. Maybe, in all likelihood, never see these specific people again. And then in that very small fraction of time, some sort of emergency or catastrophe or situation, event turns you into a family. And that idea really got me. It's like these 48 people, or by the time everything shakes out, 40 something people by the end of the season, they're thrown together and become a family because of just human nature, but also leaning on each other for survival. And that was the thing that struck me. It was like, wow, these people, if that plane had landed safely in LA from Sydney, 15-hour flight, whatever it is, and they had landed on the tarmac and gotten out and got their bags out of the overhead compartments and gone on their separate ways, that's usually how it works out. But in this one specific case, these disparate, random collection of strangers apparently are kind of thrown into this situation together. And that is an idea that I keep thinking of episode after episode. It's like, wow, this unexpected situation completely changes all their lives and makes these previous strangers the most important people in each other's lives all of a sudden. The model of that is fodder for amazing content, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. You're right. It's like your world is moving and everyone's worlds are moving like molecules through each other. And then this just freezes it in place and takes your surroundings and makes it into a catastrophic situation with whoever's around you. I think that's super neat. And I totally agree with you that it's one of the notable aspects of this show. The other notable thing that I love about the show is the flashbacks. I like the flashbacks.
Yeah, they're
a
awesome.
lot. And seeing how everyone interacts with each other before things happen. And like, there's some pretty cool scenes. For instance, I think in one of the houses or in the apartment that the Kims are in, Sun and Jin, on the TV in the background is Hurley on TV, if you look, winning the lottery. But it happens like 7 episodes before you even find out that he wins the lottery. Like there's things like that
awesome.
all the time in the show. But what's interesting is it shows that they are interconnected actually before the events, or at least that's what it indicates, right? And so I think that there's some pretty cool connective tissue there as well. I love mysteries like this. That's why I was interested in getting you to watch this, because I feel like, especially the next season, now that they're getting into the hatch and everything, it's going to get really good now. This is the shit I really remember loving coming up. But I made a list in addition to having stuff from the audience to bring in as well. But I made a list of mysteries and I made a list of characters.
Okay.
And I figure we can go through each of them and just touch on them as little or as much as we want to. And so let's start with the characters before we get into the mysteries. Let's start with what I think we can agree is our protagonist, Jack. Jack, of course, is played by Matthew Fox, famous actor. I don't know what happened to Matthew Fox as of late, but we knew Matthew Fox, of course, from Party of Five, where he played Charlie Salinger, of course. Man. But if you look at his filmography, he does very little. Like he doesn't do very much at all. In fact, after Lost, like he's done one small TV role, it looks like, and maybe a couple movies. So he doesn't really.
That's interesting.
But I think some of these guys, like they made, I can't quite recall, but I think by the end of Lost, like the entire ensemble were making millions of dollars an episode, plus all of the syndication rights and all of this. Like, I think there are just some guys that don't love it that much. And I think he was like, I did this. I did Party of Five for 7 years. I did Lost for 6 years. It's like, all right, I'm good. I'm
fine.
Tens of millions of dollars in the thing.
Disney money.
Right. It's like, I'm all set. So I think that's, but I have always found that interesting about him because I know him from those two roles because I used to like Party of Five a lot too, as you know. I used to watch that with Dana. So what do you think about this character of Dr. Jack Shepard? The surgeon finds himself on the island as kind of the people, everyone looks towards him to kind of lead, and he does. He takes the initiative, hardworking. We find out a little bit about his past. He's going to Australia to retrieve his father. We find out, and a lot of this stuff, by the way, was stuff I totally forgot about, like all of the really small things that even might have went over my head when I was like 20 years old. But that he fucks his father fucks him by calling him into a surgery where he nicks this woman's artery or something. She ends up dying, and he asks his son Jack to cover for him. He doesn't. He's always been an alcoholic, and that's why he did this in the first place. But he kind of goes on a binge, ends up in Australia, and dies at some point. Jack goes and retrieves him. So that's what we know about Jack so far as I know in the show.
Yeah.
And there's also some other interesting interactions. We know that Sawyer, for instance, had an interaction in Australia with Jack's dad, and there was all these weird intertwining things. So what do you think about Jack Shephard?
Yeah, man, I'm not even sure I knew Matthew Fox was in this, let alone the protagonist. But he was great. It was so cool to see him pop up because he's so charismatic. Obviously, he's extremely handsome. I really admire this the way everything he embodies physically is like, wow, I wish I could be that guy. Almost like a George Clooney, type, or a John Hamm, like that level of charisma. So it is kind of shocking that Matthew Fox doesn't do more. And, he's kind of seen as the leader. Now, he's a doctor, he's a spinal surgeon, and he's got that knowledge. But what I love about the character so far is that he brings an equivalent level of emotional baggage just like everybody else. He's got his monkeys too. And I like that, that he is a leader. He's courageous, and he's got that selflessness about him, but he's got those chinks in his armor just like everybody else, which makes him, puts him on equal footing. And I think that plays up the tension too, because you could see his weakness as well, even though, he's on the outside, he's holding it together maybe better than the majority of them. But he's got those, he's got that soft underbelly as well, which is really makes him a great character. And I have to say, one of the stronger character performances in the show too. I think there's some really good acting in this show and some not quite up to snuff acting, but Matthew Fox does a great job. And, he's a leader. He's a protagonist you could really root for.
Yeah, I agree. He's a very interesting. I feel bad for him. There's something.
Absolutely.
There's a few things caught in this love triangle with Kate Sawyer.
Yeah.
Everyone looks to him for advice, leadership. He's also on call for all the stuff with the medical stuff. I mean, the situation where he's tied into Boone and the other stuff's happening with Claire and he can't even really go is so interesting. Like, so it goes to really show and I think illustrate really well why he's under so much pressure. He's also doesn't really trust a lot of people. He has a kind of an adversarial relationship with Locke, who's my favorite character. We'll talk about him in a little while. And so yeah, Jack, we're just getting to know Jack now, but a lot of sadness there as well. And we'll find out more in season 2. Let's talk about Kate. Kate is a pretty interesting character in and of herself. In and of herself, played, I think, pretty well by Evangeline Lilly. What do you think about Kate's character? This mysterious prisoner on the run, chased down by a U.S. Marshal into Australia, betrayed by a farmer who is supposed to help. We find out that she's responsible for the death of her old lover, who she rendezvous with one day, and basically uses him to help her mother, who freaks out when she sees her. And we also know that she engineers a bank robbery simply to get this old memento of her ex-boyfriend as well. So Kate's an interesting character, again, caught into this love triangle. What do you think of her and her performance?
Such an interesting character. Evangeline Lilly does such a good job. I don't know. She played one of the elves in the Hobbit series, right? Or something, but I don't know her from a lot. I know the name because the name is so iconic.
Yeah, she plays Toriel. Yeah.
Right. But I don't know her from very many things. And I think she does a wonderful job. An awesome performance and a cool character. At first, a little bit of a character that for me, I was really trying to figure out. It's like, how is this innocuous girl? Not that she can't be tough or strong or all the girl power stuff, of course, but like, how can this girl who seems so smart and level-headed and kind and everything, she's got this obvious criminal background. She's being escorted by an air marshal on the plane. It's like, what did she do? And I don't even think we find out the core crime that puts her on the run from the law yet. I don't think we found out yet. But we see her running afoul of the law, the bank robbery, her now doctor boyfriend getting killed because she tries to get away from the police. By the way, what is it with her and doctors? That's another thing we got to start asking ourselves, right? But really great character and another one of our protagonists and somebody who you're really trying to figure out. And interestingly, it's kind of a neat thing that they do. You're rooting for this character without knowing exactly what she's guilty of. And that's interesting. That's an interesting position to put the audience in. because you really don't know if you're rooting for a good guy or a bad guy ostensibly yet, right? Like
Indeed.
you really don't know at this point. And that's fun, I think. That's a fun thing to do.
All right. Yeah, I agree. By the way, it's interesting because she's like Matthew Fox, where she doesn't do very much. She actually does very little. What people would really know her from today, she is in the MCU. She plays the Wasp in the Ant-Man universe.
Oh, in the Ant-Man film. Yeah, I have to see those.
So, but otherwise she has even fewer acting credits than Matthew Fox. And I think it's another example of like, well, I mean,
Lost
Jesus
the money,
Christ,
baby.
dude. I can totally understand that. I mean, at what point do you just say like, fuck it? I mean, maybe you get bored or whatever, but I don't know that I would if I had all that money. Okay, next we have Sawyer. And I'm very curious to hear what you think of Josh Holloway's performance. Josh Holloway, I actually really liked later on in an aborted, unfortunately, sci-fi series on Fox. No, it was on USA. It was called Colony, and I really liked it. I used to watch it when I was in California. It ran for 3 seasons. It was about an alien invasion of the Earth, but it's about how there's some humans that work with the aliens and are basically collaborators with the aliens. And so it was super cool. And it was starred him and the mom from who I can't remember her name from The Walking Dead. So he's been around. He does a few things here and there, and I know that I really wanted to support him there as well. He played basically the same character.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just like a Sawyer-like character in a dystopia, So what do you think about Sawyer? We know he's a con man. In fact, I think the episode that you kind of get introduced to him with all that is called Confidence Man. And he has this thing where he's like lets the money out of the suitcase and tricks the woman into thinking that they're basically getting in on this great deal, convinces them to go halves with him on this fake oil rig or whatever they're investing in, and then moves on to do it to the next woman and so on and so forth. And we learn that he is on his way out of Australia and on Oceanic Flight 815 because he's deported. So he's thrown out, and so he finds himself on this plane. What do you think about Sawyer?
I mean, this guy, I'm not familiar with him at all, the actor. And he really felt like somebody so out of Days of Our Lives or General Hospital, just super handsome, oozing good looks. But I really got to like the character. I mean, he plays a really convincing, slimy confidence man, the total self-preserving type, but charismatic. Just that guy who's the looking out for number one type. And you're wondering, like, is he going to be kind of like more of a Han Solo type where you could root for that? Or is he going to be somebody who kind of lets the others blow in the wind? And, obviously you're not going to root for somebody like that. But slowly there's a thaw with the character over the course of the season and an understanding. And also one of the characters, once you get those flashbacks with him and you see what he's gone through, really gives you a modicum at least of sympathy for the character. And you could see how he got there. You could see how he got to be this guy that's on the island now, that's hoarding all the supplies in the plane, and he won't give the inhaler to Shannon, like that type of dude, like where he's just really that looking out for number one, nobody else matters. But that slowly starts to get chiseled away over the course of the season. And one of those guys, really one of those things I find myself rooting for a Jack and Sawyer sort of understanding, because you think these two characters might really, when they get together, they could probably do great things. You got the quick-witted con man type, you got the knowledgeable and unselfish doctor. Like if these guys could just kind of knock it off and stop the infighting, they might be able to do some great things together. So I find myself rooting for that relationship to happen. But, a really fun character. And in the beginning, maybe a little aggravating because it really gave me that soap opera feel. But, won me over.
I love when the I think it's someone's knocked in the water. I guess it's maybe Jin is knocked in the water at the very end of the last episode, and he like does this like swan dive into the water to like go get him. It's just ridiculous.
That's right. He totally does.
It's so funny. Yeah, he's definitely a pretty boy, but
we'll
see much more of Sawyer. How about Saeed, played by Naveen Andrews? We find out he's an ex-Iraqi Republican guard, an interrogation officer. Pretty dark background. I think it's especially important, Dagan, to point out the timeliness of his character being in this show and the way he is treated, especially early on. it's supposed to really be a mirror up at America about the way we maybe were treating Middle Eastern people post 9/11,
Sure.
and certainly going to Iraq and having a direct connection to all of that. I really like that it kind of confronted America and the West through fiction in a pretty clever way. So I like this character a lot. He's obviously really into tech, and he has a lot of knowledge on military affairs and all of the rest. So he plays a very important role in their survival. What do you think of that character?
Yeah, great character. Really one of my favorites so far. Great performance. And it definitely is timely. I even think about Lost this season, 2004, 2005, and then it spans through 2010, I believe, right? For the final season.
Right. That's right.
But only coming, 2004, we're talking about 3 years after 9/11, right? So the timeliness of not only having a plane crash story, but I like tying in this Middle Eastern character and the racism that he's dealing with on the island. And then in the flashbacks, when he sits down on the plane, the guy next to him is kind of giving him the thin eye. And, but he's a good guy. He's an Iraqi Republican Guard, and he's also a linchpin for our heroes on the island because, again, he has that military background. Just like the Jack character has that medical background, this guy's going to be important for their survival. He knows guns, he knows tactics, he knows people. He's a tough guy, and really, really a fun character. And I like what they do too with him, with the relationship with the younger sort of Paris Hilton princess type. I didn't see that coming. And that was kind of a fun little thing to do in there too, where, I don't know, there was part of me over the course of the season where I was like, all right, everybody's pairing off. And that's a little aggravating. But I think A, it's kind of fun. And B, it probably would happen like that, right? It probably would. That's just human nature. You're going to kind of find each other and you're going to hit it off with certain people, and relationships are going to form even in a situation like that. So there's even a little reality about that sort of thing, love blossoming on the island despite this catastrophe.
What about Jin and Sun? We can take them together, played by Daniel Dae Kim, who might be one of the more famous people in this show, actually, and Yeonjin Kim, who I think is still active in South Korean media today in various TV shows and movies. What do you think of their characters? We learn some pretty interesting things about them. Obviously, Sun comes from a very rich South Korean family. Her husband is of a lower caste, I guess, in that society. And he comes from a fisherman's village, and he courts her and they fall in love. But in order to kind of be with her, we find out through insinuation anyway, that he's basically become a fixer and maybe even a hitman for her father. And we also find on Sun's part that she kind of wants to escape. She's scared of this life. She learns English and actually was planning on getting away. Neither of them probably would have been on the plane had she decided to go through with it and just leave him. So a lot of interesting stuff here as well. And I think a pretty sad arc too in a lot of ways. And I really love the scene with Jin when he goes and visits his dad in one of the flashbacks. I think that's a really, really great scene. And he apologizes, and they have and the dad is like very stoic, and it's a great performance. Like, he's very stoic and kind of just a man about it, and gives him advice and tells him to go. And so what do you think about Jin and Sun and their relationship?
I really like them. And again, I think they're the two characters that kind of brought me into the fold and got me invested in the drama and took it out of soap opera material and kind of escalated it to the next level for me, oddly enough. It's a really interesting story. I mean, I guess really what they're saying is that Sun's dad is like the head, if not the top guy at like the Kia or the Hyundai, the South Korean car company. So she comes from an extremely wealthy background, and here's this guy that's courting her that is, of the lowest class, most blue collar fishing village type of guy who has conviction in her, his love for her. And then she's cool enough to fall back in love with him, even though she's of this noble background, super wealthy background. And it's so interesting what happens, that the father accepts him, or the father-in-law accepts Jin under the terms that he'll come work for him. But then puts him in this situation where he's not just a car company executive. He's an assassin. He's a hitman. I mean, really, that is what he is. I like describing him as a fixer, Kyle. And that he's got this darkness, but at the same time, there's this conflict because he's doing it for love. He knows that's the only way he's going to be accepted into this family and have son as his wife. So he's got to do the father-in-law's bidding. So it's really dark, and he does those things. You know, we see him come home with the bloody hands, and he's washing in the sink. But he's also, we learn on the island that he's very controlling. He doesn't let her walk around with her button unbuttoned, or let alone, God forbid, in a bikini. And so there's a lot of things going on in this relationship. And I love what you said too. Good reminder. I almost forgot that Sun was in the offing of leaving him at the airport. She had the whole thing set up through a proxy, and she was getting ready to go into hiding, basically, to get out of this relationship, whether it was fear or unhappiness or a combination of both. And she's thrust back into this marriage. She has her second, she second guesses at the airport, but she's thrust into this marriage again when they crash land on this island only hours later. So it's a really interesting. They really have one of the more interesting backstories, I think, and super fun. Super, super fun, and you really want to see it work out for them. And they essentially get divorced on the island, and then come to some sort of understanding again right before Jin leaves on the raft.
Right, and I like
rooting for him.
A little frustrated about one thing when she gives him that book with the Korean terms.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Why didn't you write the English terms there so that other guys on the boat can read the thing and say, like, this is what we're talking about, like, both ways? A little frustrating because she can speak both languages. A little weird.
She could have done that.
A little weird.
A little strange.
Let's talk about Locke. John Locke. Terry O'Quinn. Who, for my money, my favorite character. Because I think there's the most mystery around him. He embraces the island most because he's the one that's most immediately changed by the island. And he can walk after being, paralyzed for several years. Now, we get a lot more of his background later on. But
oh man,
this character is awesome. I love Locke. I love how he has this affinity for the island and will do. He immediately knows, but keeps to himself that there's something up here. Like before anyone else knows, he knows that something is up with this island. And I also like this idea that he plays around with, especially with Boone, where he feels like he's losing his connection and power with the island and needs to like regain it. So he's deeply entwined with the mysteries, which are the most interesting part, I think, of this whole show. What do you think of John Locke? Don't tell him what he can't do.
Dude, whose favorite character is somebody besides John Locke? I mean, he's the enigma of the whole show so far. Such an interesting character. The more you get of him, the more interest he garners. It's such a strange character, such an awesome performance. I remember, the first, I don't know how many episodes, handful of episodes, I'm thinking, okay, who is this CIA Black Ops dude? Because he's just, obviously he's got this wherewithal, he's got this survival training and stuff, but then you learn he's just like some office worker at a box company where he's from, and he's just like this vacation adventurer type guy, like this weekend warrior type. And then the reveal is that he goes to Australia, and I think that's when they reveal that he's paralyzed from the waist down. And you're like, oh, what is happening right now? But then for some reason, when they crash on an island, he gets the use of his legs back. And then you're just wondering what is going on with this guy. And you're spoon-fed his background via flashback like everybody else. And you find out everything. Like his parents sold him up the river for one of his kidneys. Like it's like, whoa, like what, he worked at a toy store. Like he has the exact opposite background that you think initially this guy came from. He's hunting boars in the woods with a buck knife, and it's like, what kind of badass is this guy? Like Mission Impossible, Secret Service type dude. And he's the exact opposite. But again, he's the type of dude, it's like every question that's answered, there's two more that's unfurled for us. And I'm in with this character. I have no idea if his intentions are good, if they're bad. He seems like a good guy most of the time, but then things get a little dark. He's responsible for the first character on the island's death and sort of runs from that. and tries to hide things from the others. So there's a lot of questions around this character, but I would be in just for him at this point. He's enough to keep you going, I think.
Yeah, he's great. We learn so much more about him. He's obviously central to the show, so we don't know nearly enough at this point. I remember quite a bit about his story later on, and there's a specific character that's introduced in his flashbacks, and I know you'll know who I'm talking about when you see the actor that plays this person, for sure. Keep that in mind. All right, Charlie, let's talk about Charlie. We haven't talked too much about him. Actually, we haven't really talked about Charlie at all. He's also one of the more famous actors, Dominic Monaghan, obviously, from Lord of the Rings and many other things. Charlie Pace, ex-rock star, bassist of Drive Shaft, singers of You All Everybody, the smash hit. What do you think about this character, tortured by drug abuse and all of the rest? We don't get to know too much about him, but what's interesting is that we find that he's kind of in the thrall of his older brother, who's the singer of the band, and kind of comes to emulate him. And when the lifestyle kind of takes over and they have this old promise to kind of walk away, they end up not, and he ends up kind of becoming like his brother. And then his brother gets out and has a life and success and a family and all this, and Charlie's all fucked up. And so the shoe's on the other foot. So pretty interesting and tragic character there too. Of course, he has a relationship with Claire, who we'll talk about in a little while, on the island, and all the rest, and a relationship with Locke as well. I actually love the thing where Locke tells him to keep asking him for the drugs and he'll give them back. I like that whole, it's very weird Locke thing, arc. But it's good. So what do you think about Charlie Pace?
Yeah, man, Meriadoc Brandybuck, Cousin Mary. I didn't know Cousin Mary was going to be in the show. Charlie's probably the first character who I was really down for. I really liked him from the start. Again, this English member of this rock band, famous rock band, or a rock band who was in the throes of getting famous, and his monkey is the heroin. And I loved it. It took me episodes to realize, once they found that plane with the Blessed Mother, the Mary lawn ornaments with the heroin inside, I didn't even realize how that's going to become a thing. That's going to kind of tie up with Charlie's trying to kick his...
Yeah, like he has an infinite amount of it, basically, if he wants it now.
It's unbelievable. That was such a clever thing to tie into the story with the character.
Totally.
And, he's that guy, he's that junkie, but he's got the heart of gold. And he's the one taking care of Claire and her baby, and a character I think you could really get behind and root for. And also actually commits the first murder on the island, doesn't he? Right? He blows up the mysterious Ethan.
Mm-hmm. Ethan
just
Rom.
trying to negotiate with him and get answers, and he just blows him away. So again, that darkness too with the character. A lot of the characters thrown up in that sort of gray area, and that's what makes them interesting, I think.
We also have Michael and Walt, his son Walt. I think this is one of the more interesting arcs so far. And Harold Perrineau does a really nice job, I think, as this character as well, Michael. What do you think of this father-son relationship? They're stuck on this island, but they don't really know each other. I like a lot of the little touches. We find out, for instance, that the dog isn't really the son's dog. We find out that the dad wanted to be involved, and we slowly learn that he was kind of, I don't know, Michael's maybe a little bit of a lowlife, or kind of a dreamer, where he was an artist, but he didn't really have a job, and he was working odd jobs, and he's just this very educated and climbing woman that kind of leaves him behind. I like how it puts it on the other foot a little bit, where the woman is in the position of power financially and all of the rest, which the man usually is. However, it also touches on this idea of men losing touch with their kids because of the decisions of women and all of that. So I think there's a lot of depth to the relationship between Michael and Walt, and I dig it a lot. And then I like how he kind of comes to really love this boy. He loved him as a small infant as well, we find out, but is driven to create this boat to get off the island, really to save his son. So I really like that. I think it's quite touching. And I think it's touching on the other side that Walt, although I don't think he admits it to Michael at this point, that he's the one who fucked up the first boat. What do you make of Michael and Walt?
Yeah, dude. And, that's really everything that you said is really well said. And also, what happens is trying to rescue his son, he just ends up feeding his son to the lions. The result of that, trying to get off the island, is actually that's pretty much how the season ends, which is so interesting. I love Harold Perrineau. I think I was introduced to him in Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. That's the Leo DiCaprio, Claire Danes joint. And he plays Mercutio in that. And he's so good in that, dude. You guys got it. He's not in it long. So he plays Romeo's best friend in that. He's awesome. But so I was really excited to see Harold Perrineau pop up here, but I don't think he does that great of a job in this show. He's a better actor. His performance is a little clumsy, I think. But the character is interesting because of everything you said. He's kind of this alienated father who's, the struggling artist type and maybe a little irresponsible. And the wife is this intelligent professional who pursues her interests and ends up leaving him and sort of tossing him to the side. But you could kind of understand where she was coming from with that, leaving and starting a career. And then it turns out she falls in love with the head of her law firm and marries this guy and pretty much kicks Michael to the curb and yanks him out of the baby son's, at that time, Walt's life. And now he's trying to make up for lost time with the son. And it's cool. It's cool to have that father-son relationship on the island. And you really do empathize with Michael because he's trying to build this relationship while he's in this impossible situation. So he's trying to do this impossible thing with this already impossible, under these already impossible conditions, which is, kind of heart-wrenching in a way. But it's interesting. And, he's one of the main characters. And then there was something in the season where they seemingly have dropped where I thought some sort of romance was being kindled slowly between Michael and Son. And then they seem to kind of throw that by the wayside. And I think when you're juggling 14 main characters and then you have these other extraneous characters, you got to be careful with that, right? Because you're trying to handle a lot. And sometimes they drop things like that, but they seem to have dropped that for now. So I'm wondering if they're going to go back to that. I don't really know how they could, because Michael, Sawyer, Walt, and Jin are off the island on the raft right now. But that was an interesting plot development that I was interested to see if they flesh out or if they're just going to leave that alone now.
How about Boone and Shannon, played by Ian Somerhalder and Maggie Grace? Now, this is funny. They might actually be the two most famous people on this show. Maggie Grace is the girl from Taken. She's the one that gets taken 3 different times inexplicably. And Ian Somerhalder is from The Vampire Diaries, which ran for a really long time on the CW. And so like big with teen girls and all that kind of stuff. So they're low key famous as well. Now, I really like these characters a lot. First of all, Boone's got the very early to mid 2000 mid aughts look to him, like the guy liner type look. I don't think he's wearing it, but I love that look. I remember being really enamored with that when I first saw him in the show. I was like, oh, this guy's really handsome. And then we learn that they're brother and sister, but they're actually not. They're stepbrother and stepsister. And Boone basically travels around saving and helping his stepsister Shannon. But then we learn that Shannon is basically taking advantage of him and taking him for a ride as well. So another person that's kind of being used for his kindness. And I feel for Boone because he's like an authentically good person. You could tell he's got a good heart. He's trying to do the right thing. And Shannon is just an abuser. And she kind of I like when she's dragging his clothes off the beach and kind of freaking out over it and not wanting to leave things behind. I think she realizes that she kind of lost the best thing in her life with that guy and didn't kind of really took it for granted. So I dig their relationship. And yeah, Boone is the first death of the core cast. So he's gone now by the end of this season.
Yeah,
so what do you think about them?
Boone, we hardly knew ye. Yeah, I mean, these are the two socialite kids. I like it on the island. You meet these two and you're already like, oh, these two, like Silver Spoon, wealthy, bratty kids. What are they going to get up to? That type of thing. But Boone almost from the start is trying to help Jack. He says he's a lifeguard. He's trying to be instrumental in them surviving or acclimating to this new situation. And the Shannon character is funny because I can't help but see her, especially during this time, 2004, 2005, as the Paris Hilton proxy, right? The socialite, the brat, Silver Spoon. She just wants to laugh. The whole first week of this whole incident, she's like laying out on the beach and she's worried about her suntan lotion. She's in her bikini and she's not really contributing. But Boone sort of calls her out on that. And they're interesting because as you find out, they're not blood siblings, they're step siblings, and Boone has this, he's got some sort of love for her that goes beyond, I don't know, is it incest if they're step siblings? I guess not, but it goes beyond that platonic love. And there's a lot with Boone that's funny because you got these socialites and you have these two kids who never probably lifted a finger at home. Now they have to survive, now they have to literally survive. Locke brings Boone under his wing a little bit, and then Shannon comes along. You find out she's only 20, but she wants to, it turns out, there's a little bit of a growing up arc here. She wants to be helpful. She wants to be instrumental. She kind of forms this relationship, this slowly forming relationship with Saeed, which I think is really cool. And, I just think it was really fun. And the Shannon character was weird for me because I don't think the performance was that great. And I remembered her from Taken. She might be in Taken 2 also.
She's in all three of them.
She's in all three. I remember laughing at her performance stories. I love Taken, especially the first one. But, I remembered that, like her being like, all right, kind of a weak link in the acting. But it kind of works for the character in this too, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. Good casting.
It works. And she's interesting because she's a really self-sabotaging type. She gets into these relationships, these predicaments with these men who abuse her and take advantage of her. And then Boone has to go to the rescue. We see him traveling the world, basically trying to free her from these situations. So it actually played out really cool. They're interesting characters. And it was sad to see Boone go. Can I also say when Jack was deciding whether he was going to amputate Boone's leg, I was like, oh shit. And he's using the hatch, which I guess was part of the plane. Was it?
Yeah, I think it might have been
a landing gear thing?
Yeah,
or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, something very heavy.
And I'm like, holy shit, is this going to go like in a Saw direction? Because this show will surprise you. It goes into black comedy elements, which we'll get to at certain points. So it's not afraid to go off in different directions and switch up the tone a little bit. So that was another thing that I was really like, I don't know if I could take this. Is he really going to do this right now?
Well,
but Boone just dies instead.
Speaking of the black comedy, I mean, let's talk about Hurley, who I think is that character in this show. And I really, really like this performance by Jorge Garcia. It's funny because they have to be kind of self-referential about his weight and all of that. They make a couple of jokes about that. It doesn't really make any sense. But the funny thing about Lost is anything can be blamed on the island. It's like, oh, the island did this, and the island's the reason that he doesn't lose weight, even though everyone else does, and all of this. But we find out that he won the lottery, and I actually think his backstory is the most interesting because it is most deeply involved in the mystery of the island through the numbers, which we'll talk about in a little while. So we find out that he wins the lottery, and then everything goes wrong. And I love the way they show it. Like his mom breaking her ankle when he's trying to give her the house, and the grandpa dying when he's being interviewed, and then of course crashing on this island. But I do like how they show that he's trying to get back. Like he's a good-hearted man. Like he's trying to get back to be with his mom on her birthday. Like it's very important to him. And so he's fascinating because he really is most deeply connected to the actual mystery, but we don't get too much of him on the island itself.
No, and you know what? He might be the last of the really core characters whose backstory is explored. Like it's episodes before we get to Hurley. But he's very endearing from the start. I really like the character. I like that we learn first that he's in this halfway house or mental institution. And, he's walking around the island with the Walkman on, with the Discman, and then we find out like this guy has over what? He has like $156 million. He's a huge lotto winner, and his life changed so much before this plane crashed. And you're just wondering, yeah, he's got this tie to family and all these things, but it's the numbers. These winning lotto numbers these numbers that play out in the story so far, that's really at the core of his mystery. And the bad luck thing. I think he's tied to that, and then something weird that they go into a little less so than Hurley with Walt. That Walt has some kind of strange power too. They play into that with the flashbacks with the dead birds and stuff like that. But there's something, they're saying something that there might be a character or two or three that have something to do in some mystical or supernatural way with this plane crash, and Hurley is certainly at the center of that.
Yeah, he's. I'm anxious for you to learn more about all of that as well. I think it's cool to include some good-heartedness in such a serious story. So I think that character is quite welcome. And then we have a couple more characters I want to talk about. Claire, we haven't talked about yet, who is the Australian girl. I think the only Australian on the island, which is funny because the plane's coming from Sydney.
Yeah,
everyone's kind of leaving and going back to the United States, except for obviously the Kims are South Korean, etc., and so on. But we have Claire, played by Emily DeRavin. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And so this is maybe the least interesting character to me in some ways. It's interesting that she's really pregnant and she's going to obviously have this baby and ends up having the baby on the island. So you're kind of waiting for that to happen. And I also like the courtship between her and Charlie as well. But ultimately, she's here. We find out she's betrayed by this guy she's dating. Pretty brutal to watch. Really sad how God, imagine how many times that happens where a guy's like, yeah, let's do it. And then and then just disappears. And then how easy that is for you to do. But what I really like about her backstory is the whole thing with the dude, the psychic that will not like read her fortune and all that's like so interesting and so fucked. I love it. So that's pretty cool. What do you think about Claire?
Yeah, she's awesome. Great performance, great character. This young mom, she's ready to burst, 8 months pregnant. You're like, oh my God, this young girl is pregnant on this island. Now what? Type of thing. And then sorts of her and Charlie form this relationship, this warm relationship, which is really fun and cute. But yeah, that whole psychic thing where the psychic in Sydney is telling Claire, like, very mysteriously is saying, have this baby by yourself. Don't raise this child with another person. And she's trying to get to the heart of that. Like, what does that even mean? He won't take her money at first. As Kyle said, he won't even do her reading. So there's something also very mysterious going on with the Claire character. And then, of course, her baby is kidnapped by the mysterious Rousseau later on in this first season. And your Turniphead / Aaron is kidnapped by Danielle. So she's she's dealing with a lot, this young mom. And I was curious if she was going to be the first death on the island. Maybe she was going to die in childbirth, or maybe she was going to lose the baby. Of course, you're really rooting that she has this healthy kid and that everything works out. So there was a lot of tension for me with this character, actually, because she's so sweet. And that whole thing, I think you called it up earlier, Kyle, where it was like, basically, this is the thing. Like, Charlie's trying to deal with the highly injured, almost dead Boone while she goes into labor. So that was an interesting thing, too.
All right, Dick, the final character of consequence I want to ask you about is Danielle Rousseau.
Mm-hmm.
The character's interesting, played by Mira Furlan. Mira Furlan's actually Croatian, I think, and I was reading about her a little bit. Escaped from, I think, the Yugoslavian.
Oh wow!
In the early to mid 90s, and then came here. She's deceased. She died of West Nile virus.
Oh shit!
So she is no longer with us. But
that sucks.
But this character is obviously exceptional, and we learn about her through one of the mysteries that we're going to talk about, which is the French broadcast. And I want to talk about that a little more closely. But do you have anything to say about Rousseau as a character? Kind of haunting to imagine a woman living for 16 years on the island. And she says she's never actually seen anyone else, but she just knows that they're there and hears them or whatever. And so she lives in this constant state of fear. And obviously that would drive anyone nuts. And we learn, of course, that basically her baby was stripped from her when she was born, or he was born. So what do you think about Danielle Rousseau? Anything to say?
Interesting character. Who is she? Where did she come from? I think Saeed is the first one to make her acquaintance, right? She captures him and then he escapes. And then they come back. She comes back to the camp to warn them, our heroes about the others. But that's so interesting because this kind of like half crazed woman who now everybody knows does actually exist comes into their camp and is like, you got to run from these people. And they just take her at face value. And I'm like, what? She could be railroading this entire thing. Like, this could be some kind of murderous plot. Why are you just blindly listening to this woman? And then, of course, she kidnaps baby Turniphead baby Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other thing. It's like, but what are they? That's when. Listen, this is the thing about Lost for me so far. It's like I'm a suspension of disbelief guy all the way. Like, tell me what I got to do. Tell me the tone, the style, what we're doing. I'll ride shotgun. I'll go along for the journey, for the adventure all day. Like, I'm fine. But sometimes there's those little things that are just like, why are they just blindly following this woman's lead? They don't even know who she is or what her intentions are yet,
right.
Type of thing.
Right.
But she's an interesting character. And again, one of those core mysteries of what's going on here. She's all by herself. Supposedly she lost a child. She ran afoul of some other people on the island. They did her wrong. At least that's her story so far. We don't know. So there's a lot going on with this character. It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Well, there are other characters too that I guess we can talk about if you have anything to say about them. I really don't. Rose is a character, kind of a side character. The woman that thinks her husband's still alive. Art,
dude, they drop her like a bad habit. I actually looked into her to see if the actress died.
Oh no, she's around. She'll be back.
She's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, she's back. She comes out. Okay.
Yeah, they'll get back into that.
I'm even looking for her in crowd scenes. Like, why isn't she at least in the crowd? Like in the like she's gone off the show. Like once that whole thing happens, like
we have the 9th grade teacher Arst as well, who's just in it a little bit. But what do you think about having these like background characters? They only talk about it towards the end where they talk about how there's a clique. Like we're really only getting the perspective of the clique, but most of the survivors are not really in the clique. And we only kind of see them interact with each other in certain social scenes, like the golf scenes and all of that. But what do you think about having all these characters that you don't see? I don't know that the show would be any worse if it was literally just the 14 or 15 of them. Like, I don't know why you have to have so many people, right? I think it would be more interesting that way.
That's a really good point. And that's going to be interesting to see if that plays out, if that's some sort of strategy moving forward. But I am often, again, I'm a suspension of disbelief guy. Just give me the rules. Like, I'm fine. Like, I'll go along for whatever you say. Just tell me what I have to do to get in lockstep with that. But I do often think of like, what are these other characters like? You can't just show them in the background and not. It feels like they're forming some sort of like a Lord of the Flies society where like those people don't matter. It's Jack and Kate and Sawyer and Hurley and these guys, and the rest of them are kind of like B-class citizens. That it just feels a little strange to me that you're not considering them. And then when the Arnst character comes in, again, I think I automatically knew this guy was going to be expendable. He's like the B-class action figure that you bring into the play. Like, you're going to kill this guy. He's cannon fodder. And then that's where the black comedy thing came in, where he blew himself up. It was like, whoa, are they going to really go there? And they go there. And it's like, all right, I don't know. I don't know if I understand the rules yet. And it kind of keeps you on your toes. I think it's kind of fun, but it also feels a little bit like they're figuring it out.
That becomes more of a joke later on in the show.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about the ensemble overall before we talk about the mysteries. Deep Dark Boys wrote in and said, have you guys ever seen another show that has an ensemble cast of this quality? I find that I typically gel with 2, maybe 3 characters in a long-running series, but Lost was killing it across the board. I don't know that there's a show that I watch with this many characters in it, with the exception of one, which was Game of Thrones. And when you want to talk about ensemble cast, I mean, the Game of Thrones ensemble cast is way, way, way,
massive.
way,
massive.
Well, bigger, but better.
Oh, the quality.
Yeah. So I don't know about that. I don't think that The Lost is the best ensemble quality. No, I don't.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. Mad Men might even be on par with Lost. And that's another cast. Is like, I mean, that's 1 weak spot. Doesn't have one.
No, you can't even compare Lost to Mad Men. That's ridiculous. All right. Let's talk about some of the mysteries and see what you think of them. The Smoke Monster. What do you make of the Smoke Monster? We are introduced to him almost immediately, and there's this crazy. Now, I remember this clearly, thinking this. I don't know if it's true. I don't think it is. I think it's just like one of those things I hear. But there's a scene where Locke is in a flashback and he's at his desk and he's on a calculator and he's using it and it's making noises. The noises that it makes are the same noises that the Smoke Monster makes.
Oh,
or at least they're really similar, but the Smoke Monster makes a shit ton of other noises too. And so I'm wondering if it's making noises from people's lives as they hear things that from their past. I don't know. I remember thinking that at the time, and that when I heard it, I was like, oh, that I'm still hearing that. But at this point, the Smoke Monster is just a mystery. and not necessarily related or interrelated, but we know it is to the things that are grabbing the trees and pulling them under the island and all sorts of things like that. So what do you make of the smoke monster so far? Any interest there?
I mean, I'm trying to figure out that monster thing from the beginning of the season. It's like you hear the roars, you get a little confused because now you got polar bears and you're dealing with boars. Are they just going to be like huge, giant versions of those, like Studio Ghibli-esque Princess Mononoke type things? Are there dinosaurs? Is it going to be a Cloverfield type thing? Is this monster invisible? We get that. Is it some kind of intra-dimensional thing where you could kind of see it via infrared? I had so many questions, but then that last interaction when this unforeseen monster or force is pulling Locke down into the ground, you get those mechanical noises. It sounds like chains or a winch or something. And then you see the way the smoke reacts from the dynamite and stuff, and you're like, what is something supernatural is going on here? That's really my best guess so far, is that there's some sort of supernatural, something that defies human understanding, protecting or monitoring this place, this island. That's my, I have no idea. I was wondering if they were going to kind of tip their hand a little bit and make a larger reveal, but it makes sense that they wouldn't do that yet.
You brought up the polar bear, so we should bring that up. That's another mystery. The polar bears and the boars. I actually think that they're both important mysteries because they're both not endemic to the island.
Right.
What do you think of them? Where do you think they came from?
The polar bear was freaky because automatically you're like, all right, super clever thing to do to put a real live animal, earthly animal, in this alien place. Now that almost opens up more questions than if you created a monster, some alien from scratch. By the way, this could be something cosmic. This could be something alien too. We don't know. I don't know yet. But the polar bear was so crazy because you're like, wait, what is happening? I thought that was such a clever thing. And I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before, where it's like, all right, was this some sort of research facility where they were importing animals from different places to see how they would react in this place? And why would they do that? So that opens up a whole nother bag of questions where you're like, I don't know.
How about, we talked about Rousseau earlier, but the French broadcast and the distress signal. I like how this brings in, and you were talking about it earlier with Shannon. This is where Shannon really shows her use. I love actually the shot where she has the headphones like up against her, or the radio up against her ear, and she like has her eyes closed. It's awesome. It's a really cool shot as the camera pans. What do you think about the distress signal, which was really the second mystery of any consequence? We figure out what it says and where it comes from, and we find Rousseau. Did you dig that mystery? It's resolved at this point.
Yeah, but it was cool because you knew it was 16, whatever, going on 17 years old, that something else ran afoul of this place. Something out. This island had hostages and prisoners before this plane crash, before the crash of Flight F-815. So this French SOS was interesting. But again, they do explain its origins, but we still don't know Rousseau's story really, because I don't know. I think there's a little insanity going on there, PTSD, whatever's happening at the root of that character. But yeah, there's more to learn there with that French distress signal. And then also the fact that Locke admits that he knocked Saeed out when, he hit him over the head with the log or the stick once Saeed was getting to the bottom of it. So that's another thing that kind of ties into the mystery of what's going on there with that.
We have the numbers. We brought them up earlier: 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42. This is one of my favorite things in the show. I actually have a shirt. I don't fit it in anymore, but I have a shirt that has the numbers.
Oh, that's
on it.
Freaking awesome.
And so here's what we know about the numbers. The numbers were played by Hurley to win the lottery. He learned them from a person at the mental institution. When he goes back to talk to that person and he finds out that he played those numbers, he freaks out. And then we end up finding the numbers in other ways too. We find them in way more things later, but 815, the flight number, uses 2 of the numbers. We find out that Kate, the bounty that the farmer in Australia took out, was $23,000, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So there's a lot of connections to these 6 numbers if you pay attention. And the numbers are also on the side of the hatch, which we're going to talk about in a minute.
Of course.
So, and Rousseau writes the numbers down over and over again in her notebook, and she doesn't know why she's doing it. So what do you think about the mystery of the numbers?
It's intriguing, man. They got me. Once I saw them on the hatch, I was like, wait, what is happening? Or probably the biggest thing was Hurley playing those numbers. And then the guy in the mental institution freaking out. Like, you have to stay away from those numbers. Those numbers are bad. That's bad luck. It's a bad omen. It's going to bring bad tidings. It's like, what is going on with these numbers? I love stuff like this because it gets into the supernatural or the mysticism, and maybe even involves luck and symbology and all this. So I'm really looking forward to figuring this out. But I didn't even realize the $23,000 thing. That's a great point. And the fact that the flight number's in there too.
Yeah, 815.
What?
Yeah, don't look too much because it'll spoil for you probably if you.
Yeah, no, that is the fascinating thing. Like I never heard about any of this stuff. The fact that things could be this unspoiled for me in 2022 is pretty enormous, man. It's maybe the first time I've ever dealing with something like this, so it's fun.
Yeah, I'm trying to find if there's any like full rundown on where the numbers appear. Let's see. Oh my God, each of the numbers has their own Lostpedia page. Okay, that's enough.
Oh, do they really?
Yeah. All right, let's talk about more mysteries. When they arrive, they stay on the beach for a while, but then they move into the interior and they find the caves. This is the caves are interesting because there's a mystery here that I think is overlooked, which is that there were people dead in the caves. So before they even find Black Rock, before they know that the others exist, before they find Ethan Rahm or Rousseau, they actually find these bodies. And so that's like a fundamental and interesting thing too. What do you think about the caves, and specifically about this weird need for some people to stay on the beach? You would think that you would want to reinforce yourself at some point. You keep your fire going. One person can stay there and you can rotate in and out. So it's a little weird, but
exactly.
Any mystery about the caves and them finding those old corpses?
The caves was interesting because you're really wondering where they're going to get a fresh source of water. So you're relieved for them. But that arc where there was the infighting between the party that wanted to stay on the beach and the party that wanted to move inland was so ridiculous because, as you said, why can't you just go halvesies, right? 18 people stay on the beach. If you're concerned about spotting ships and signals and all that, I understand that consideration. 18 people stay at the caves, refresh themselves, sleep in shelter, protection, all that kind of stuff. And then you trade off every week. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's like, that was one of those little things where it's like so obvious. It's like, I could suspend my disbelief again, but please, like, let's use a little reason here. I feel like this show does that more often than most things that I've seen, where it's like, all right, really, do I have to get in there and tell you guys how to do this? Like, compromise. It doesn't have to be, you could still be, some people are on the beach, some people are on the cave, then you trade. I feel like any group of 8, they figured this out in Lord of the Flies. Those kids were like 13 years old.
Yeah, it's true. Although it does bring up an interesting point of why, because someone says like, who made you boss at some point or something to Jack. Mm-hmm. And it is true. Like Locke is just doing whatever he wants. Ultimately Michael and Jin are making the boat and kind of doing their own thing. A lot of people just lay around and do anything. So there is a little bit of anarchy, and it does get into the sociology perhaps of how the situation would actually play out, which is what all Lord of the Flies is all about and why it's so good.
Yeah.
How about the Beechcraft? They find this Beechcraft, Locke and Boone. It's in the trees. They use it and try to get some messages out, but it falls. It obviously ends up killing Boone. But within, they find the remnants of what were corpses of fake priests that were running heroin in Virgin Mary statues and somehow crashed on the island. So a great mystery there as well. What do you think of them?
You know what I loved? I loved that brief, and it seemed like we were going into kind of modern horror territory where Locke, you don't even know initially it's a dream. He has that vision of Boone, and it's sort of that shaky camera, Dario Argento vibe for a minute, and Boone's bleeding, and then he sees the vision of the plane, and it was like going into really kind of spooky, almost kind of like early aughts horror vibes, The Ring and The Grudge and all that kind of stuff. I thought that was really a neat little thing that would love to see more in the show. I know it's network television, so like you could only push it so far, but that would be really neat. But the Beechcraft thing was interesting because, again, it's sourced from this vision that Locke had. Why did he know? Why did he see that plane in his dreams? Came to fruition. Now we're starting to think maybe this island has a mind of its own. It's sucking things in. It's got this drug smuggling plane up in the trees. And the other thing at the root of this going into season 2 is, did that distress signal that Boone had some kind of brief communication with who was ever on the other line, on the other side of that, did that go out? Was that received? And Boone, when that plane crashes down, sort of breaks free of the vines and crashes down to the ground. I was wondering if they were going to let Boone live through that, because that was pretty traumatic what happens there. And I really was wondering if Boone was going to make it out, or if they're going to start. I don't know the rules yet of this show. Are they going to kill these main characters? Can people die in this world? Is it going to get that grave? So that was a big deal, seeing Boone die, because now anybody could be positioned for death.
Indeed,
because he's one of the main characters.
Indeed.
So that was really cool. So that was a nice thing. And then again, using that opportunity to play up the Charlie character. He's dealing with his monkey. He's dealing with his heroin addiction. Now this life supply of heroin is on the island. And by the end of the first season, he gets wind of it. He's got one of the statues, the Mary statues, actually. So another cool thing that they were able to tie. It's very thoughtful. Sometimes it's weird for me, Kyle. Like with this show, I think having too many balls in the air or too many spinning plates could be really dangerous, because it can read like sleight of hand, right? It could read like, look at these shiny balls over here while we try to figure this out. Look at these shiny objects while we try to really kind of work through this problem. But sometimes it's really thoughtful. So they'll use an opportunity to kind of expand the story of like 2 or 3 characters. And that's the type, like with the numbers. And that's the type of thing where you could tell like there's some really thoughtful storytelling going on here, which is fun, because we're investing a lot of time in watching this thing, trying to dissect it, enjoy it. So I like the fact that they're working hard on that stuff.
for sure. There'll be more resolutions. Don't worry. What about Ethan Rom? What do you think about him? Where did he come from? And the others, we keep hearing about them. What do you make about this idea that there are other inhabitants on the island?
It's crazy creepy. First of all, it gives you the idea, which I'm asking myself the entire run of the season. It's like, how big is this place? Because I'm thinking of Castaway. It seems like he, at a certain point in the film, he's familiar with the whole island and the sort of boundaries and everything. Even Lord of the Flies, same thing. Like there's this island, and we find out when the 4 characters set sail that this place is enormous. This place is a lot bigger than I think everybody thought. So that's the first thing with that. And then, also I think it creates conflict for the characters too, because at what point do you kind of give in to getting rescued and just try to survive and put your energies into living in this place rather than escaping from this place? If that makes sense.
Totally. They'll get into a lot more of that. I think you're going to be really surprised. It gets so good in the second season, as I remember, and I'm really excited to begin it in earnest, because they really do start to resolve a lot of these things and get into
that's cool to know.
But yeah, Ethan is just the scratch of the surface, my friend. How about
I was so mad when he was killed, because they caught up to him. Charlie, Jack's getting the better of him in the fist fight, and they kind of got him by gunpoint.
Yeah, they got him. Saeed's there.
They had him.
Yeah,
he could have answered those questions. They could have interrogated. Right, Saeed could have interrogated him. They had him, and then Charlie coming in and just wiping out the possibility of us finding anything out by blowing this guy away to the tune of like 4 shots or something was kind of heartbreaking. I was mad at Charlie in that moment, for sure. You understand his need for vengeance or his anger, but yeah, it's like, but again, very clever writing and closing that door on the audience and saying, no, you're not finding out this way. You're not finding out from this character.
Okay. 2 more mysteries that I want to get into with you. The Black Rock. You hear about this a lot. Ends up being a ship from the 16th century. full of dynamite and all these other things. What do you think of finding the Black Rock deep in dark territory, as she calls it?
Did not see that coming, dude. It might be, I think the production quality is pretty good. I know they filmed in Oahu, they filmed on sound stages in Honolulu, and it's a pretty big budget, obviously. But I think finding the Black Rock was the first time I thought that looks fake. That looks like improvised stage.
Totally. No, totally.
It looks like a
I agree
sound
with you.
stage.
No, I agree with you. And one of the things that bothers me is it's like perfectly painted in the back still. I'm like, this ship has been here for 400 years. It's like perfectly painted. Portsmouth is still visible, the internal. And again, people can be like, it's the island. But what I like about the Black Rock is that it introduces this element of deep time into Lost. Like, we know the people in the caves were there long enough to decay completely. So a long time. The Black Rock is 400-year-old ship. The Beechcraft looks like it's 50 years old, right?
Yeah.
The Ethan Rom is in his 20s or probably in his 30s or something like that, right? So there's like younger people involved. The smoke monster indicates high technology. Like, it's insanity. I love it. And you can imagine that the Black Rock, the same thing that brought all these other things here, brought that ship here too when they were sailing around and exploring. And so I dig it. I love that. It's like one of my favorite things when it
that's an awesome point.
Yeah.
It that window of time just got enormous. It's like this thing is whatever's going on here has been going on for a long time. It's awesome. And then of course the dynamite and the dynamite coming into play, not only having that as a weapon, but how volatile it is to handle. And then that little bit of black comedy, which I feel like that's kind of the only moment. I mean, there's witty interactions and banter between characters, but that's the only time it really went into this thing where it's like, not only can the characters be expendable, but we could off them in really shocking ways, and kind of delves into that thing of like mean-spirited comedy. It's like, all right, all bets are off, which I like. I welcome that, and let's establish that in the first season.
And finally, Dig, the hatch is the central mystery. What do you make of this thing? Well, first of all, Locke finds it with Boone. They find it seemingly randomly, so you have to assume maybe there's some luck, like you were saying, involved in it, some reason that they ended up finding it. They dig around it, probably 10 feet, realize this thing's going deep into the ground. What's in the hatch, Dagan?
I don't know. I thought it was a submarine at one point. Is this some kind of spacecraft? Is it a bunker? But at the end, you see, they finally get this thing open. They blow it open with the dynamite. There's this long ladder leading down, seemingly deep down. I don't know. I don't know what we got here. We could assume it's not alien or, cosmic in nature because it has English writing on it. I mean, it has numbers on it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing, I guess, but who knows, right? If you're looking at the aliens being tied to Egyptians, for instance, right? So who the hell knows? But it's interesting. I'm surprised that I thought the dynamite was not going to work. And then it'd be like, what is this thing? 3 sticks of dynamite didn't blow this thing apart. And then also the other moment, which character was it where the light, it must have been Locke.
Yeah, it was Locke when the light comes through it.
The light starts shining from inside. So there's definitely something supernatural or mystical going on here, almost certainly. I don't know how else you would answer that. But it seems like one thing that was answered, and I was in disbelief, or I was certainly not buying into this theory, but I thought there was a slight chance that this could have been Jurassic Park-ish in nature. Like, are we dealing with dinosaurs or ancient beasts here? So we could pretty much, I think, remove that possibility from the equation, but there's still a lot at play, man. It's hard to figure out. I'm a little frustrated. There's that frustrating thing of knowing that there's millions of people that know this already, but I have to just kind of dig my heels in, not spoil it, and just go along for the ride.
Totally, man. I totally agree.
Totally.
Nathaniel wrote into us on Patreon. Remember, you guys can write into us on Patreon, patreon.com/lastgeekmedia. Get early ad-free access as well. Says, I think Lost is more well-known for being great at setting up mysteries and less renowned for satisfyingly resolving them. What are some of your favorite mysteries set up in the first season? And then he says, as the show continues, I'd like to hear more about your favorite resolutions as well as the new mysteries. Of course, that's the central part of the show. But so what's most intriguing to you right now? about like what do you need an answer for more than anything?
I think the very nature of John Locke, who is this guy and what are his intentions, is definitely at the heart of it, because he's a fascinating character. And also, can I say, just an awesome performance, like just consummate watching. The quality is outstanding. I think Hurley's luck, finding out if that's something to do with anything, and then the nature of this hatch, and the nature of whatever monsters or force of nature, or whatever's going on with what's protecting or overseeing this island, or this murderous force, whatever, I don't know, just everything going on here. At the very nature of the island itself, I think is what intrigues me most at this point. Also, there's the whole thing at play of what happens right before the ending, where our four heroes on the raft, Walt's kidnapped by these people. Who the hell are these people? How did they get out so far in this actual boat, this small but actual boat?
You take that boy.
Right? And who the hell are these people? That's the other thing. I'm like, what is happening? So that's fresh in my mind too. There's just a lot going on. And I also really am eager to find out what Kate did. We know some of the things she did. We know some of the things she's capable of, but what did she do? What threw her into this morass, or this life of crime, or setting her on the lam and all this? That's one thing I'm really eager to find out. I like the character, so.
Mystic Mace wrote in and said, excited for this series. One of my favorite shows of all time, and I usually do a rewatch every other summer. We'll have to do that now to keep up with KnockBack. The theme of white versus black, or good versus evil, is prevalent across the series. Would love to hear that explored, and if you noticed it at all during the season. So they get into it literally one time, I think, when they're playing backgammon, when Locke and Walt are playing backgammon.
Yes,
and he holds the pieces.
Great point.
But have you felt that polarity in the show yet?
A lot of the time is spent trying to figure out, and I think that's our nature, right? Especially with watching TV or movies, reading books, we're trying to suss out who's good and who's evil. For me, I'm questioning the character's intentions, especially enigmatic, mysterious characters like Locke. It's like, what does this guy want? What's fueling him? Is he a force of good, or is he a force of evil? Is he bad, or is he good? I don't know. So that there's a lot of that in this, but I feel like there's a handful of characters where we're not sure yet.
One of the things I wanted to ask you as we go, and we can talk about whatever else we didn't talk about yet, if you'd like. Christopher Toffolo wrote in about this. He says, greetings, brothers. Glad you are going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. Lost is well known for its literary references, from Twain's Tom Sawyer to Joyce's Ulysses and more. But it goes one step further in some instances, with having actual characters read certain books on the island. For example, Sawyer is reading Watership Down in season 1. How do the themes of that book surface in the overall story of season 1 and or in the character of Sawyer through Lost's first season? Did you notice any other references like this? Thanks and be well. The literary references in this show are actually very deep, and it goes right to the characters' names. So, Sawyer, it was brought up already, but sure. Kate's last name is Austen, spelled Austen.
Oh, shit. I don't know if
Boone's last name is Carlyle, who was a famous British philosopher. Locke's name speaks for itself, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on here as well. Rousseau is another example.
Yeah.
So did you pick up on any of the literary stuff? You and I are really into that in Mad Men specifically. They are very into that in Mad Men, and I find that there is a definite mirror here with Lost. I don't know if that came off to you.
I love that. I mean, the Watership Down reference, I love the fact that they had Sawyer sort of passing his time by not being helpful and just reading books and magazines and stuff. But Richard Adams' Watership Down that's one of my favorite books. And, that's a book that's about a group of characters who are thrust into this situation. And it's a communal quest for survival. So you could understand that being a reference to some T.S. Eliot in there. But I love that. And I love all those little kind of, I guess you would call them Easter eggs, although that's a kind of a played out term. I love having that kind of thoughtfulness and almost the inspiration for the story kind of thrown into the story itself. It's always a great thing to do that. And it's I think it's, you could see the passion that it's fueled by because of those literary references. And that's fun. I got to be a little more in tune with that. I think I was a little sloppy with that in this season.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to discuss about season 1 of Lost?
You know what? I'm having fun. I think the show finally got me, and it's a good time. I'm looking forward to season 2 because there's a lot of open-ended stuff going on, a lot of questions that need answering. And I think, like a lot of great stuff that we talk about, there's just really good characters that we're invested in. And you want to see how this plays out for them. And, and I like tying in their very human dramas, their backstories via flashback, the monkeys that they're dealing with, the relationship problems, the issues, the baggage that they're bringing into the story. So it's not only a matter of survival on this island as a team, it's a matter of individual survival and overcoming whatever they're dealing with. Very clever formula for a show, and season 2 should be good. I'm excited, especially knowing that you're excited about that particular season.
Oh yeah, season 2, dude. We're gonna be talking about things that we have not. I want to talk about, but we can't talk about yet. But we will at the end of season 2. We'll
do it soon.
There's so much in season 2 that they're gonna answer. So I'm really excited for you. Yeah, we'll do it in a couple weeks. I'm excited for you to keep going. I'm gonna keep going. Probably this weekend and just keep watching.
Yeah, momentum is important,
especially because I know that in the first season of the second. Like the first episode of the second season is awesome. I remember how it opens, and you're gonna love it. So
I'm very lucky because we talked about this in the beginning of the episode. I didn't have that cliffhanger type experience. Now I watched it on Amazon's Freevee, which is a commercial model, so I had to watch it with commercials. So I got a little taste of the original airing that way. But I don't have to wait week to week to find out answers. I could just keep going and savor that momentum. And I think jumping into season 2 is going to be the same thing. I think that momentum is important because you're in the spirit of the thing, not only with trying to figure out the riddles and answer the questions, but just getting in lockstep with all those little things that are, those little details that could go overlooked if you're not being super attentive. So yeah, the momentum is going to be fun, and it's a different watching experience. We don't have the water cooler experience, but we could do it. We could catch up every couple of weeks, so it's fun.
I'm excited. Yeah, I'm really interested to see you get further in, and yeah, we'll get deeper into the mysteries of the island somewhere in the South Pacific. Who knows where? I was going to ask you, although I really kind of asked you this several times, but to put you more on the spot, it's like, if you had to say now, what is going on? Do you have any, do you have an answer?
You know what? There's part of me that wants it to be, I don't know. There's part of me that thinks about the idea of coincidences and wants to see them do something with that. But there's clearly something supernatural. So I think, I don't know. I'm kind of weighing what I would like to see versus what I think it is. And I think it's something scientific on the island. Like, I think there's some sort of scientific thing that happened on that island that's kind of the fallout of some kind of situation that has a mind of its own type of thing. What I don't want to see is something extraterrestrial or supernatural. I'd rather see something that's of the earth that man created that maybe went awry, if that makes sense. That type of thing. And I think I broke myself of just wanting to see a disaster story. Like, that's what I thought it was going to be going in, and that's what I was fixed to deal with, I think, was like, okay, hey, this human survival story, how are this group of people going to survive on this island together? But now I think maybe something underhanded would be kind of cool. I don't want to say the evil scientific corporation or pharmaceutical corporation or that type of thing, but maybe something like that would be kind of fun. And, how it affects these people, how it affects these very specific people, and how that could kind of elicit our empathy and all that kind of thing. I can't ask you the same question because
Yeah, I know too much.
You know too much, my friend.
Well, answers are coming. I'm very excited to talk about the next season. And in the meantime, thank you all out there for watching us speak about Lost season 1, which by the way, I forgot to say this at the top. I thought I was really cute, right? I was like, okay, so I'm like, I'm smart, I know things, and then in my mind I'm like, where was Lost? I was like, ABC. Okay, so who owns ABC? Well, Disney. So I was like, all right, Lost is on Disney Plus. So without even looking, I just signed up for Disney Plus, and then I went and looked, and I'm like, nope, not here.
No.
And then where was it? Hulu, which I already had. So
it's on Hulu?
Yeah, it's on Hulu. Where did you watch it?
I watched it on Freevee, which is like Amazon. Amazon apparently bought IMDb and then started this thing called Freevee, which is Amazon Prime with commercials, essentially.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's on Hulu if you're interested without commercials. That's where I'm watching it. But
okay.
I mean, Hulu has commercials too, but I pay for I can't imagine paying like $11 for Hulu with commercials. It's like, are you kidding? Just pay the $15, please.
I tried that years ago. It was infuriating.
It's insanity. It's like, dude, they want you to just give them the extra money. Like they're trying to annoy you. So,
I could switch to Hulu now. That's good because the Freevee thing was kind of driving me nuts.
Yeah, it's on Hulu, and so I just thought people would find that funny because I did successfully identify where I thought it should live, but for some reason it's on Hulu. So, and I forgot to mention the other important thing, and maybe we can talk about it more because it'll become more prescient later in the series. Is that Netflix or Lost was one of the first streaming phenomenons on Netflix. Like when Lost was still on, the first 3 or 4 seasons were on Netflix, like right in the beginning when they first started streaming on PS3 and Xbox 360 and all that. So it must be. I would imagine that's one of their biggest shows ever still. And it's at some point it was there for years, and at some point it left. So I think it was during a time when companies were not as clever with their licensing and didn't know what they had. And so Absolutely. I think Netflix somehow had Lost captive for like a very long time. It's the same thing they did with The Office and Seinfeld and all that other shit. And they had to relinquish all that. But all right, Dave, let's end this episode of Knockback like we do each and every week with a dad joke.
All right, I got a good one for you. This is from our friend, our pal, Jorge, on Twitter, DM, Kyle. This kind of ties into the episode a little bit. Do they allow loud laughing in Hawaii? Or just a low ha?
Stupid. By the way, does the show feel like it's filmed on Hawaii? I think they really do a nice job of making it feel like it's not anywhere you've seen.
No, I feel like it could be South Pacific-y, somewhere near Fiji.
Wake Island. The corpses of Japanese soldiers.
How did it go so wrong? How did they get 1,000 miles off course 6 hours into a flight?
I don't know.
Just seems like a little too much of a coincidence to me. Right in the middle of the flight, 6 hours in over the Pacific. What is going on here, dude?
I don't know, my friend. You're going to find out. I'm telling you, you're going to like the second season because it's all about the mysteries, as I remember. So
that's fun.
So you're going to, it'll be, oh my God, we're going to have, the things we're going to talk about at the end of the second season are totally different than the things we're going to be talking about. Or we are talking about now. Yes.
I'm excited, man.
All right, my friend. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate all of you out there for your love, kindness, and support of Knockback and all things Last Stand. Patreon.com/LastStandMedia. You can buy merch, by the way, laststandmedia.store. I think that's what it is, isn't that what the link is now? I have to always look. Let me see here.
Check it out.
It's in the sacred symbols. Yeah, laststandmedia.store. And remember, we have free domestic shipping on all stickers. So check that out if you'd like. And
nice.
Leave us nice reviews on iTunes. You can watch it on YouTube. Most of you guys like to listen to Knockback, but some of you like to watch because you're perverts. So that's it. Dig, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Don't tell me what I can't do. Knockback, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. Knockback's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including Knockback, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.